Hi everyone, my name is Bella-the-Actuary, and today I'll be interviewing a very special guest, Ainsley Ramsey. Ainsley currently works as an actuarial consultant and has done some really exciting things within her career, like memorizing over 1,000 digits of pi and founding a nonprofit organization. So before we get into the video and learn more about Ainsley and her achievements, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you can stay tuned for more actual science videos. Ainsley, you're known around Arizona as the woman who has memorized over 1,100 digits of pi. What inspired you to start doing that?
Yeah, so I'm from Arizona and I went to a middle school here called Basis, well known for being really advanced with STEM classes specifically, and they have a really strong STEM curriculum. And so I had one of those moms that was, if you get a B, you're failing. And so my mom voluntold me to join math club after I got my first B in math class in sixth grade. At the time, we were doing a lot of time tests as the activities for the class, at least from what I remember. And unbeknownst to me at this time, I actually have ADHD and time tests don't always work well for me. I was diagnosed when I was 17, so I had no idea at this time in sixth grade, but safe to say I wasn't doing great on the time tests. And then they mentioned in the club that Pi Day was coming up and they'd be doing a pi recitation contest and the winner would get a pi. And I thought that that was really my opportunity to shine. So I went home and memorized digits. I think I got to 100 and then I successfully recited them. And I won the contest and I brought a pie to lunch for my friends that day. And clearly it was a core memory because I still remember a lot of chunks of it. And then come high school, I went to a local high school, Xavier. They also did a pie recitation contest where I dusted off the skill. And that's when I decided, every year on Pi Day, I'm going to try and do 100 more digits than the previous year.
So with that, how long does it take you to memorize 100 digits of pi?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that since I do 100 more digits every year, there's some stuff that I retain throughout the year. So I don't memorize it year long and September of a given year where it's so far out from Pi Day, I would maybe remember 200 and then I relearn it. So if it's a chunk of 100 that I'm relearning, it's going to be faster. It might take me 5 to 10 minutes. If it's a
Oh,
completely
wow.
fresh, yeah.
That's really fast.
Yeah. If it's a completely fresh chunk of 100, then maybe like 15 minutes. Getting the 100 all together is less the challenge, and it's more at the end putting all the chunks of 100 together. So I do memorize them in chunks of 100. It's more just, oh yeah, this chunk that I remember as the phone number chunk comes after this chunk that I have a different name for.
Yes, I know you mentioned to me once that you have a specific method for memorizing those chunks. Can you talk more about that and like some of maybe your favorite chunks of pi?
Yeah, so first off, I will say that I do think there's something to how my brain just processes numbers that gives me an advantage. So, what I mean by that, I mentioned that I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 17. Part of the test was they would repeat words to you. So, say for example, dog, cat, house. And then they expected you to respond with those words, but backwards. So, house, cat, dog. Then they would add a fourth word and I go again. And they just see how you do and compare it to all the other scores they've done, whatever database. And I did on average for when it was with words, but when it was with numbers, I was able to go for an arguably very long time. I don't know if it was fully off the charts, but it was abnormal. And so to start, there's something to, I believe, how I process numbers. And then after that, it's really just I think putting a story to it is the best way to think about it. It's associating certain chunks of numbers in a specific way and then remembering the order in which they go. So some examples of how I think about it, palindromes are usually words that are spelled the same forwards and backwards. So think about maybe the name Hannah, for example. There's a lot of number palindromes in pi. So for example, one that I'm thinking of now is 38183. So backwards and forwards, it's the same. Another trick is if there's a personal association. So my dad's favorite number is 47. That takes a roll. I also mentioned the phone number chunk. That's probably the easiest chunk to remember every year because of those associations. So that chunk has it's the 400 to 500 chunk. and it has 602, 623, 480, all of which are Arizona area codes. And then also it happens to have elements of my mom's phone number. So the way I remember it is with those phone number chunks. So for example, there's one piece, trying to remember how it goes. Oh, it goes 480 744 623 799. So it's an Arizona area code, and then 7 and 2 repeated numbers, 744, then another Arizona area code, and then 799. And in my head, 4s and 9s look alike, but they're still different. And so that's how I remember that chunk, is it alternates between the 7 and 4 or 9 and the Arizona area code.
Wow, that's really cool.
Thank you.
So it seems like, based on how long it takes you to memorize chunks of pie, it seems like you have a pretty easy time, maybe compared to someone like me who I think that would be really difficult. But do you still find it challenging to memorize pie, or have you ever run into roadblocks or chunks of pie that you're just not able to come up with a story for?
Yeah, there's definitely those chunks. And the fact that I can't come up with a story for it is kind of the story itself. So it's remembered by me as, oh, this is the part where it's really random and difficult. And sometimes that's just how I remember it, of it's a 24195 and I have no idea how to make a story. So I just remember that it's a tough part coming.
Do you plan on continuing to memorize 100 digits each year, like for the rest of your life, or do you plan on stopping at some point?
So I think inevitably at some point I'm going to have to stop, just because I am noticing that it gets more difficult each year, largely just length of time. So I know I mentioned it's pretty quick to, again, get chunks of 100 isolated. What will happen is, say maybe I memorize the 1000 to 1100 chunk of 100 and I have it down, but then I go back through, the first 1000 and realize that I don't retain now another piece that I've already had down. So because that gets harder, I recognize that I can't keep doing it. I'm trying to come up with a logical stopping point, but it's not at the forefront of my mind right now. Maybe it's when I hit 1500. Maybe it's when it's 10 years of fundraising. I don't know. But also I'm in a space right now where I live alone. I'm really focused on my career. There might be a future where my life situation looks really different. And then the question is, will I still be able to sit down for hours on end and memorize and recite pi? I don't know. So there will be a natural end. I just don't know where that is yet.
I think it would be cool to continue to see you memorize digits each year. So hope to
Yeah.
not see you stop soon. Speaking of fundraising, though, you are the founder of a nonprofit organization called Piece of the Pie that raises money to advance STEM education here in Arizona. How did your passion for memorizing pie inspire that?
Yeah, so throughout high school and college, I would do 100 more digits every year. When I was in high school, my school actually put on a pie recitation contest. So there was a semi-public way of marking that, of, okay, I did it, all good. In college, to my knowledge, that didn't exist. So it was just kind of I would sit there and memorize it myself. Once I felt like I got it, I would test myself on a specific site, and then I would maybe post an Instagram story, like, did my tradition. And so there was this overarching question of, why would I keep doing this? And then fast forward to graduating from college. The first company I worked at out of college, which, I still love, even though I don't work there anymore, I connected with one of my bosses named Meg. She still works there. I look up to her in so many ways. And especially being so early on in my career, I really was kind of looking out and grasping at any opportunity for female mentorship, and Meg was one of many people I was able to find. I then started working with her very closely in the late 2020, early 2021 range, and one thing that I really admired about her was that she was so well-rounded. She was a managing director at the company. She also had 2 children. She had a husband with a very competitive and busy career. And still she made time to engage with her own community. So every Thanksgiving season, she does her own fundraiser within her community in Vermont, where they raise money for turkeys. People can donate literal turkeys, and they help stock food banks. And so thinking about how I could really start out or make a mark in my life post-graduation, I looked back to that. I looked back to who I looked up to. And I thought, how can I make my own version of a fundraiser? And so, on very much a whim, I remember one day I was working from my dad's apartment with him, and I just decided this is the day I'm going to do it. I went to Whole Foods, I grabbed a random cake, and then I took, this is really detailed, but I took a piece of paper and I drew a pi symbol and then cut it out. So I put like this paper with a pi symbol shaped hole in it on top of the cake and poured sprinkles, all to create like a pi symbol pattern on the
That's
cake.
so cute.
Yeah. And then I had my dad just take pictures of me in his apartment holding the cake. And I posted and I said, I'm going to be raising money now until Pi Day. I think it was maybe 2.5 weeks prior. I had no idea where it was going to go. I just solicited donations on Venmo. Prior to posting, I, of course, looked into what exactly do I want to raise money for. And I found something called the Connect Scholarship at the Arizona Science Center. In the first few years, a lot of the programs that we were donating to, Connect being one of them, had to do with the pandemic. So already there's a resource discrepancy in STEM education resources, depending on what school a student is at. Add in a pandemic where kids aren't going to school in person, all of a sudden they're missing out in really key years on STEM demonstrations and, inspiring that passion in STEM. So that's what we raised money for that first year was the Connect Scholarship. I think I raised about $3,400 that year. And
Just from Venmo? Just from Venmo.
Yeah. Yep. Over like 2 or so weeks. And then I remember, now I do these bigger Pi Day parties to celebrate with the team. But at that time, for my friends, I bought Pi pun t-shirts for each of them to wear. So one said like Pi Felicia, one said an opinion without pie is just an onion, just stuff like that. And we just hung out and celebrated the end of the fundraising. Because the pie thing is so specific, and I totally recognize that, there was never a thought of this will grow into something so big in the future. However, I did find that a handful of people reached out to me and thought that the fundraising I was doing was really cool and it resonated with them, which I didn't expect. So I decided to do it again the next year with 3 people joining me. They were all people I knew through college. They were all in my sorority and they were all math majors just like me. Someone I went to school with thought of the term piece of the pie and I took it and ran with it. And yeah, it's grown ever since, and we've learned so much along the way. 2022, the second year, there were 4 of us. We raised about $8,400. 2023, we had between 8 and 10 people. We had 8 full-on members and then a couple high school ambassadors at the time. And that was when we raised $11,500. And then 2024, last year, we opened it up to really anyone that wanted to join, as opposed to kind of picking people like we did previously. And so we had about 30 people. And that was the year that we raised $19,500. And so now here we are with like 34 people on our team this year, I think, with a fundraising goal of 20,000. We have a pending application to be a 501c3 nonprofit. So we're learning as we go, but clearly, there's a need for it and there's people who are passionate about helping out. So it's really cool to see where this goes.
That is amazing. Every time you say that, this year our goal is $20,000 and last year you were able to raise over $19,000 for something so nation specific like pie and piece of the pie. I think that's really cool.
The first year I fundraised, I actually didn't tell the Science Center at all. So I just kind of went one day and donated around $3,400. I think they emailed me and they're like, "What? Who are you?" And since we've been able to build a really strong relationship with them, and I think it just again goes to show how needed these programs are.
Is there any specific reason that you can personally relate to Piece of the Pie's mission, or what motivated you to start the fundraiser like that one day in your dad's apartment? What was the catalyst for actually creating that fundraiser?
So the initial motivation with that initial fundraiser was wanting to build out my experience, become more well-rounded, and make an impact in my community. I never expected, again, that it would resonate with other people, but it did. And so the motivation to keep it going has shifted with time. And I think a lot of it is that it's a great way for individuals, and at this point, particularly women, to network and connect over their experience in the STEM field. I think a lot of times being a woman in STEM, specifically a very specific field within, the STEM sector, can be really isolating. I remember being in college and being an actuarial science major in the School of Math, pretty demanding. And I was also in a sorority. And at the time, that kind of crossover was something that I didn't really see a lot elsewhere. For all I know, it totally existed. There were all these other women who had the crossover of a specific STEM major and being other things too, being outgoing, breaking the mold of what a woman in STEM is usually thought about being. I think that isolating experience isn't necessarily because you're the only person, but it certainly can feel like it, just because there's no bridge that I can think of at this time that connects those types of people. And so I've found over time that it's a great way for individuals in those situations to connect.
So, Ainsley, in the future, like if people want to join or support Piece of the Pie's mission, how can they do that?
Yeah, if people want to join, they can absolutely reach out to me. I will answer in any form, whether it's text, Instagram, DM, email. All the information is on our website as well, on where we can be reached out to. And yeah, we take anyone. I think another way in which, reasons to join Piece of the Pie has expanded as we've grown is the opportunity to own a task. So what I mean by that is maybe something like designing t-shirts. Say you're a graphic design major and you want to pursue a career in graphic design, not necessarily STEM, but a lot of times when you're an intern or a student or even an entry-level employee in a field like graphic design, my understanding at least is that you're not immediately given high-stake opportunities to be in charge of the design. You might be contributing to it and then have a manager, adjusting, grading, changing it, but not necessarily you are running that project. And so Piece of the Pie gives you an early and pretty low stakes opportunity to do that, because if someone shows up and walks up to me and says, I would like to design the merchandise, I'm going to give them that chance. I certainly can't do it myself. And that's the case for a lot of different arenas, especially once we become a 501c3. The door really opens for us to do more active, direct, hands-on programming rather than just fundraising on behalf of the Arizona Science Center. That's why it's so important that not only women in STEM can join, we also are open to men. For the record, we are open to anyone, regardless of gender and anything else. But it's really just caring about the cause, wanting to contribute that time and that effort, and meeting new people. And so far, it's worked.
So, moving on to work-related things, you currently work as an actuarial consultant. When and why did you decide to go into actuarial science?
Yeah, so I always knew that I wanted to involve math in the work that I do as an adult. I just never really knew how. I was passionate about both the healthcare field and the math field, and I wanted to find a meaningful way to combine both of them. And so going into college, I was a math major with a pre-med focus. And coming into the School of Math, you learn about the other different majors that are within the school. So I was somewhat aware of actuarial science for the first time in one of those sessions in college. Prior to college, I had no idea what it was. So there was this class that I took that was basically, okay, you're a pre-med major. Here's what you need to do to be able to get into med school, and a good one. And one of the requirements or unspoken requirements was that you had to have certain introductory classes completed by the end of your sophomore year. But since I was a math major, as opposed to, say, a biology major, it was all these classes I had to take for the pre-med component before the end of sophomore year, plus my normal math workload. And it would have meant really pushing myself every single semester, in my opinion, arguably to the point of burnout. And so I really had to assess if it was worth it. Also in that class, they showed a video of, I think, a central line being put in, and I felt pretty dizzy after that. I've never been great with medical stuff, ironically. I've passed out when I've gotten shots when I was a kid. And so I always had told myself, I'll get out of it. Overexposure to these things will make me less woozy about it all. But I think the class combination component and that was really a message to me of I need to maybe pivot. And that's when I realized that you can be an actuary specifically in the healthcare field. And I thought, maybe that's it. In the in-between, so as I was still assessing in my first semester of college, I did get to have a really unique internship, though, that I'm grateful for, which was I got to measure brain tumor MRIs at the Mayo Clinic for a summer, which was really exciting. I think it really taught me that in general, people aren't often made aware of the fact that math can be used in many different careers in a very enriching way, but it's not really talked about. A lot of times, going through college, say, for example, sorority recruitment, they would ask me what my major is. I would say math, and the response would be, oh, great. Do you want to be a math teacher? To which, of course, being a math teacher is, to be clear, like a very important job. It just wasn't for me, and it's not the only option. And so communicating like it's the only option is difficult to hear. All that to say, that's how I landed into actuarial science. I took the Intro to Actuarial Science course the second semester of my freshman year after transitioning into the major. And I was really just kind of trying it out. I had no idea if it would stick, and it did. And so now I work in the healthcare field specifically.
So now that you do work on the health side of actual science, can you tell us more about the kind of work that you do? Just like a brief overview.
Yeah, so when I first started out after college, I worked at a healthcare consulting firm that primarily set Medicaid managed care rates for different states. So, in other words, you're setting the overarching Medicaid reimbursement rate on a statewide basis for X state. So, that's what I really focused on early on in my career. Then I got into strategy consulting at my old firm. So, none of the actuarial stuff. It's we have this program and we want to change this rule, or we want to change this legislation, or we want to change how we completely run our clinic. And we would come in as consultants and provide assistance and support to get them closer to that goal. That's pretty rare from what I've seen in actuarial consulting, is dipping into the strategy consulting. So when I moved to my current company, I knew that I wanted to at least retain a piece of that or be involved in projects where I'm involved in the programmatic side as well as the actuarial side. And I'm lucky enough to be able to do that at my current job. So what I do really just depends on the client, but I like to work specifically in the behavioral health space. So I do a lot of utilization projections for behavioral health clinics or agencies. I help with cost reporting for specific behavioral health clinics called CCBHCs that are becoming really big in the US. And then most recently, I work with some projects related to the JI population, which is the justice impacted population. Those are individuals in jail or prisons. And there's some really exciting legislation changes in certain states that allow me to help out that population as well.
It sounds like you do really important work within the healthcare industry, and I can imagine that would be like one of your favorite parts about working as an actuary in the healthcare space. Do you have any other specific parts of your job that you really love or something that has been really challenging?
Yeah, so I think everyone should have a reason to wake up each day and go to work, and something that really drives them. I like to think that in some way I have a hand in helping people in a really complex and sometimes scary healthcare system in America. Mind you, it's in a very indirect way, but to be fair, I did try the direct hands-on approach for a bit and it wasn't for me. So
Do you have any advice for younger people wanting to get into the actual science industry?
I think whether it's getting into the industry, getting into consulting specifically, and just in life,
Hmm.
it's communicate. I think communicate what you want and go and get it. I think a lot of times when people start out at a company or they're an intern, they feel either this power dynamic or there's this fear of being wrong or looking stupid. And a lot of times it just means that they keep quiet or don't ask questions, when in reality, being the person that communicates what they want to do, what they're interested in, asks questions, those are the people that move ahead faster, because by getting answers to your questions, you're understanding what's going on more. By communicating what you want, you're empowering your leaders and your managers to set you up to on a path to get to that goal. And when you're not doing that, the only person that you're not serving is yourself. So that would be my biggest advice, is to just go for it and don't be held back by the fear of being underqualified, of being wrong, of looking stupid. If you got the internship, there's a reason for that, so go with it.
Yeah, I love that advice. I feel like I can personally relate because I just started my career 6 months ago. And that's something I've had to remind myself of is to continuously speak up about what I want to work on or ask questions. And one thing that helps me when I'm, self-doubting or not feeling confident is that I literally just started my career. So if there's any time in the world to look stupid, I don't, that's my fear when I'm speaking up is like, I don't want to look stupid. If there's any time to look stupid, it is now. It is when we're just starting our career. It's when we're young. So why not go for it?
Yeah, you got to take advantage of being the new person. Say it is a really stupid question, which usually isn't the case, but let's say it is. Asking it in your first week when you're really just trying to figure it out versus asking it 6 months later and everyone's like, oh my God, how did they not know how they're supposed to know that? Makes a huge difference. So take advantage of it.
So how long does it take you to recite all 1,200 digits?
So the recitation video the past few years has been like just about 10 minutes. It definitely is really quick for the first few hundred digits, and then it gets a little slower where I'm very clearly struggling in my head for the right digit towards the end. So depending on how much I practiced it, it might cause some variability in how long the video is, but roughly 10 minutes.
Now, would you be willing to show us your skills and recite some digits of pi for us?
Yeah, I can do 200. All right.
Okay, here we go.
3.1415926535897793 That's 100. 8214808 5505-822-316-47093844609 5505-822-317-253-594-812-848-11745-0284 1027-0193852110 That's 200.
That was insane. That was insanely fast too. When you started, I was expecting 3.1415, but you were like 3.1419. That was so fast.
Doing it faster helps a lot, especially if it's in the early digits. Like the first 100, for example, I could always do. There's no moment where I forget it. And so in my brain, I can go through it really fast. And then it's with reciting, it's like, okay, let's get the easy ones done first so that I can really focus on the ones that maybe I'm a little unsteady on so that I can take more time, or not take more time, but rather like focus on it, get it done and move on. So I know I have it right.
Right, like saving the mental energy for those harder ones.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much for doing
Yeah.
that. Okay, well, those were all the questions I believe that I had for you. So thank you so much for coming on today and speaking about your organization and Pi and working as an actuary. If people would like to reach out to you, you mentioned they can find you on LinkedIn and Instagram. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Our Piece of the Pie fundraiser is still going on, so you can donate via GoFundMe or Venmo. You can purchase merchandise on our website, and that will all financially support us. And
Amazing.
follow us on Instagram.
Thank you everyone for watching. Bye.